cover product design today. Even though you would have dedicated designers in your company or wherever you work, you would be very closely involved in the design part, more than you would be involved in the engineering part, because design is something which determines what experience your customer goes through. So that is why, as a PM, you have to make sure that the experience is smooth, it's easy for the customer. Hence you will be working very closely with the designer, also giving a lot of recommendations on how the experience should be. In most cases, the UI part will be, the interface part will be decided by the designer, because that is what they do and that is what they are good at. But when it comes about the experience, how the user journey would look like, is something you would be determining, working closely with the designer. So what is product design? Anybody wants to answer that?
Product designing is the process of developing the entire look and feel of the product, how the product is supposed to appear, like the entire work of building the appearance of the product. That's product design.
Okay, that's absolutely incorrect. But I'm glad you said that, because product design is not about how it looks and how it feels, it's about how it works. So yeah, I'm glad, because you pointed it out, and that is how, by uh, figuring out what it is not, we'll figure out what it is actually. Cool. So product design is basically a process of understanding a real problem and then building usable products and smooth experiences for solving that problem. That is how you achieve a best design. So it is not about how the how it looks or how it feels. It's about how you are able to use it. So for example, if a company like Swiggy is helping you order food, it is solving a problem where you would otherwise have to go and get food from your restaurant, like do a takeaway, or depend on individual restaurants to deliver it to you, where there would be no tracking and all. Even if Swiggy's UI was not as great as it is, you would still use it if it was solving all the use cases for which you come to the platform. So it's not about the look and feel. Obviously, the look and feel makes you enjoy the product. It gives you a delight while using the product, but core uh, the core thing about here that you are solving as a PM is how a customer is able to achieve what they want to do with ease. So with design, with interfaces, of course. So that is what product design means. um, but how do you actually build a good experience? What is the recipe of building a good experience? The first one is psychology. You have to understand user psychology, how they feel. uh,
Alfie, just a second. The screen is actually looking too small for everyone, right? It just covers like less than just the middle of the screen, very small part. So I think if we come to the examples, they won't be able to see it. Yeah, now it works.
okay, my screen was minimized.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, it's fine now. Yeah.
Yeah, so can you see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, you are able to see it in full
Ah,
size, right?
now it's fine.
It's fine, right? Okay. So yeah, you have to understand how users feel about the product, what they, how they feel about, the task they want to do, how they feel about the problem. Um, so you all know humans minds are very complex. So understanding psychology, what triggers them, what motivates them, do they want to be rewarded to do a particular task? um, what do they expect from the solution you are providing? So understanding human psychology is very important here. Then once you have understood and set the right expectations. You have to build a interface where usability is easy. You can get users job done. You can get them do something which they want to do with maximum efficiency, minimum effort, and high accuracy. You don't want them to fail when they are using your platform. You want them to achieve the goal which they want to achieve with minimum effort. Interface should be easily comprehensible, which means that whatever you are trying to convey should be easily understandable, self-explanatory most of the time, and shouldn't be something complex where user is just breaking their head to understand things or even to understand how to go ahead with the app. Copywriting is, what you write on the app, what communications you put forward, how is the tone, is it simple, or is it complicated, is it direct, or never put sarcastic tones in wherever you are communicating within the app. It should be uh, supporting a user to again do the action they want to do, so it should be clear, simple, and direct. After you have done all this, you have to observe how users are reacting to this entire experience or design. You have to analyze their behavior. There are a lot of tools to do this. If not tools, you can also passively watch a user, using passively or actively watch a user using your application and understand how they are behaving, because sometimes what we think about our assumptions that they are right, they may not be, and we shouldn't be keep building on assumptions. So analysis shouldn't be done to prove yourself right, but it should be done to throw some light on what you have done, whether basically to show you the truth, and not to prove yourself right. So these are the five broad levels, steps that you have to follow for designing a good experience. After you have analyzed what you have built, you have to keep iterating back to understanding how users feel, building a good usable product and interface, and then also keeping a tone which is clear, simple, and direct. So yeah, that's about how you build a good experience. The next thing which I would explain is some basic design principles, though there are infinite and the list I'm going to show you is not exhaustive, but these are the ones you will end up using, or end up referring to most often. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, so don't think that these are the only design principles. There are plenty, there are so many. Some of them you develop while you start working, while you use apps more frequently. Again, and these principles keep evolving with time and how our interfaces are evolving. So what is valid today may not be valid 5 or 10 years later. So keeping that in mind, let's move forward. Okay, so you see a picture here. There's a text on the left, there's a text on the right. But what happens when you see this? I mean, do you even read?
You don't.
And what happens when you see the right one?
You read the titles first and realize what is it about.
Matter is.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So what happens when you see something like this where you don't know where to look at? It's human tendency that you will see something on the top left, you'll move to the right. So basically you kind of read the first sentence and then you go to the bottom to see, just you scroll through the page to see what it is at the top, at the bottom left, and then you move to the right. So it's like a Z pattern. If you would have noticed, your eyes must have moved, like a Z when you first saw this page. And what happened here, because there were headings, we highlighted certain texts. Your eyes moved like an F. You first saw this line, then you moved down, then you saw the second line, then you moved down. It would have been an E or an F. So basically this is a Z and the F pattern. The point I'm trying to make here is that if you segregate your content in this particular manner, you highlight a certain um, um, certain information which is more essential. Like here, we are trying to highlight the price of uniform link color. So, I mean, this is the place where the user will decide if they want to read about it or not. So the making happens here. Again, when they see this heading, why the problem persists, the making happens here, that should they read further or should they not. So the indentation and the segregation here helps the user to decide if they want to read or not, and also gives a pleasant reading experience. It is not cluttered. This is very cluttered and all over the place. Like it's so clumsy when you try to even read it. So this is the first principle, visual hierarchy. You have to segregate main headings with the uh, body or the main content, because your heading will help the user determine if they want to read it or not. Also, then there are like paragraphs, there are bullet points. So this is a kind of a visual hierarchy we have created based on like what is nested under what. So having a visual hierarchy in your application, in your product, is also very important, so that users know what to see first. And this is something which will happen naturally. They don't When you looked at this, you didn't consciously decide that you'll scroll across this in a Z pattern. It just happened. Similarly for this, so this is a natural behavior, and the way we build our products should be aligned to this human behavior. Cool. Next one is, you have to standardize navigation across your apps. So, for example, why do we have a footer here? This is a question, whenever you use apps, these kinds of questions are something you should always ask, that this footer is sticky across any page you go in the app. Why? Because a user might use this everywhere and anywhere. So if you know that there are certain actions which would be repetitive and might be used by a user at multiple stages, then you should make it standard and make it fixed. Imagine if there were different options here, and when you move to the this is a home page, when you move to the accounts page, there's a different set of options here. It would just confuse the user, that I mean, which means that if I want to search, if I want to use one of the options from this navigation, I'll first have to go to accounts and then access this navigation. So I'm not able to standardize my navigations here unless I make them same across all the places. So standardization is very important. Now this is something you'll notice in all apps. Any popular app that you use, navigations are standardized across each of the pages. So it is so normal to see it like that, that you may not even notice that it is done intentionally. So whenever you deconstruct an app or study an app, try to notice these things, that these didn't happen by default. There was a lot of thought process given behind making something fixed and standard across all pages. So this is the second principle. Third one is browsing, searching, and discovery. How do you design these experiences, and what are they? Browsing is basically when it's like window shopping. A user doesn't know what they want. They've just come on the platform to check out things, and they are checking things. So how do you make a browsing experience simple? It should be easy to go through the catalog. Okay, let's take example of Tinder. Here, if you want to browse through users' profiles who could potentially be a match for a date, you just have to swipe. You keep swiping, and at every swipe, you can take a decision whether to like or not like the profile. So your swipe could either be left or could be right. So Tinder lets you, browse through these profile with a very simple action. There's no nesting here. You don't have to go and look out for these profiles. Also, they don't show like 10 profiles together so that you don't get confused. Like if imagine you saw like 10 guys or 10 girls at the same time, what would you select and what would you not? It would, and also it would be like, relative to that particular 10 people you saw, so your decision would be biased. So this is about browsing. The second is searching. A user wants to search something when they know what they are looking for. So you have to build an experience in a way that when a user is coming with an intention to buy something or look for something, you make that experience easy. They don't have to go through. Imagine if you had put browsing experience in place of searching. Like, I know I want to, so compare Facebook and Tinder. For example, I want to find Nishit on Tinder. I can't. I mean, because there's no way I could search for him, right? I have to browse through profiles, and accidentally, if his profile comes, then that is how I may find him. So, but Facebook lets you search profiles through writing their names and some particular keywords. So here there the search experience is smooth, because they know that users are probably coming with an intention to look for what they already have in mind. So here I have an example of Amazon, where Amazon lets you search by category. So obviously you would most likely you would know that what category or product falls into, and then you can select one of them and search. There's also option to global search, which is in the top right corner of the nav, right? So this was about searching. The third thing is discovery. Discovery is something where user has come to do a particular task which they already have in their mind, and they happen to discover something else while doing that task. So for example, if I want to purchase bed sheets, I would go to Amazon and search for a blue color bed sheet. But what Amazon would do, they would also show me sponsored products related to this. So while I was searching a particular bed sheet, say from I want to check out Wakefit's bed covers, I would also be shown other products related to this, or something like users who saw this product or brought this product also bought this particular bed sheet. So that is how I am able to discover more items. That is how discovery works. So uh, now you have all the three experiences. You would know in which case to build for what. That is very important. You shouldn't build a search experience when you want a user to discover something. So yeah, that's about browsing, searching, and discovery. Pretty simple concept to understand, but when in practice, make sure that you don't miss out these concepts. Any questions so far? So what are the first three principles that we learned?
Visual hierarchy,
Yes.
then standardized navigation,
Standardized options in the footer or some portion of the entire page,
Right.
preferably the footer or the header. Yeah.
and
Okay, cool. And the third is obviously browsing, searching, and discovery. Cool. So the fourth one is fourth and fifth one. So fourth one is axis of interaction. What does it even mean? So before I tell you about this, I want to show you guys a video. So let me just share my other screen. Just give me a moment. You all can see my screen, right?
it's gone now.
Yeah, on purpose. Okay, cool.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
Answers?
14.
18.
Okay.
21.
Sure. Anyone else?
Take a second. Was it really basketball?
Yeah, it's a basketball. Don't be so paranoid.
No, I'm guessing something like this is going to come.
No, just count. Other people, how much did you count?
Can we see it again?
Sorry?
Can we see it again?
No.
I think we're supposed to count everything, like all sorts of us, even though most of us
No,
are.
you just have to do what is told in the video. You have to count how many times the basketball was passed by the people who were wearing white t-shirt.
Okay, I counted like 14 with some error, maybe like +2, -2. No, not -2 actually. 14.
It's fine. It doesn't matter even if there was an error. Anyone else? How much did you count?
14.
Okay. Shreya?
I counted 10 only.
Okay. Cool. Everyone answered it. Nikunj said 21, Karthik said 14, Sahil 14, and Shreya 10. Sudhanshu?
18.
18. Okay, cool. ठीक है. The
The
correct
correct
answer is
answer
15.
is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Okay, all of you saw it?
Yeah, the
Yes, I've
gorilla was
seen
the reason I missed one count.
Who didn't see the gorilla?
This
I
video
saw him when he was going
see.
out.
What?
I saw him when he was going out.
Yeah, but did you see the gorilla enter?
No, I don't think so.
Who all saw the gorilla enter? Okay, Karthik. Karthik and who? Anyone else?
I did, but because I've seen the video before.
Oh, okay. Okay, then you are not a part of my like test audience right now.
I think you should have said 15 then.
Even if you saw the video, you should have answered it correctly. Okay. So the point here is that what actually happened in the video, that you were told to count the number of passes made by the white t-shirt people, right? So, and the gorilla was always away from that white t-shirt people group. So your entire focus was in noticing the
Right.
white t-shirt people, and that is why you didn't notice when the gorilla entered, and also because the gorilla was black and you were supposed to avoid the black people, right? Black t-shirt people. So, right.
Just a possible design flaw in the video is in the starting they said selective attention. So the reason probably I saw it was because I was concentrating on the black t-shirt people as well, because I thought this is a selective thing. So they told you to be selective about white. So I was trying not to be selective about white, just to.
Okay.
So I mean, if you tell me that this is about selective attention, then I'll try to be more alert, right? So this that could have been like
But
a.
you got the point, right? I mean,
Yeah, I got the point.
it is very likely that you would miss the gorilla, right?
Hmm.
This is what about you? Did you notice the gorilla?
I had seen the video before, so
I know, but when you saw it for the first time,
for the first time I did not see the gorilla because
so
I thought,
I didn't see the
Same
gorilla
here.
enter or leave, but I saw the gorilla dancing in the middle of that thing because that was like very close to the white t-shirt people. So that is what I had noticed the first time I saw it. Cool. Getting back to what we were discussing. Um, So axis of interaction means that, you know, a particular line which human eye naturally notices. So over here, it is very likely that you would be noticing the left side of this screenshot because it has the activity tab. It has the category of the kind of, so this is a screenshot from MyGate in case you haven't used that app earlier. This is a kind of activity that happened. This is more information about the activity. This is a status. Um, Again, here's a call to action to call the person who has entered your society. So your all the major information is on the left. So naturally, you tend to, you know, notice uh, the left side of the screen more. To put it in the other way, all the information is towards the left because naturally you would notice the left side first. So that is why they have placed in this manner. And anything that, you know, which is secondary with respect to these information or actions is placed on the right, which is away from the axis of interaction. So here the axis of interaction is the left side. Whenever you want any significant thing, information, or action to be placed, you should always place it near to the axis of interaction. And something which you don't want the users to do, you should place it away from the axis of interaction. In most apps today, the axis of interaction is in the center. Keeping it at the left is something kind of outdated these days. But in web it is still there though. So, but in the app it's mostly in the center. The next one is forms. How do you design good forms? You'll have to design forms all the time. Like in some or the other flow, you would have some kind of user input that you have to take. So what basically forms are? Forms are a way to collect information from users. How do you make it easier for users? By giving them contextual instructions, which means that you have to give instruction for every information that you are collecting. Having right labels that, you know, this field is for collecting email. uh, you know Giving instructions like this field is mandatory, this field is mandatory, what field is not mandatory. Showing errors correctly when you are not submitting the field value the way it is intended to. Also showing the input type. For example, here the input type is a drop down where you where you select a country code, while for phone number the input type is a 10 digit number. So basically you would want your users to have all the necessary information they need to have before filling a form. So like 4 things to always keep in mind: have labels, have instructions, make sure you put error messages so that if they try to submit and you don't accept the response, they know why. uh, and the fourth one is that you share the input type. So what form of data you are trying to collect? Is it a paragraph? Is it an email ID? Is it a phone number? So yeah, these are the things you have to keep in mind. Moving ahead, number 6, how to design a good call to action. So what are call to actions? Call to actions are just actions which you want users to do by their choice, obviously. So any I so here the call to action is add money. You want users to add money to their Bounce wallet. This is a screenshot from Bounce app. um, Call to actions have to be a verb because again action is something about doing, so it has to be a verb. Um you have to explain the purpose and the benefit. So call to action here is saying that if you press this, money will be added to your Bounce wallet or Bounce cash. um, in case required, you can also, based on the use case, you can also create urgency by the kind of text you put in the call to action and the kind of colors you put there, how you highlight it and how you communicate it. So again, 4 things to consider for call to action is verb, purpose, benefit and urgency. So um, very much linked to this comes the concept of primary and secondary buttons. So when I try to, suppose I click withdraw, when I want to withdraw my deposit, here I see two buttons. So let me read this full thing for you. Withdrawing security deposit. You can't avail bounce keyless scooters if you withdraw. Do you want to continue? The first CTA that you see is no, I changed my mind. The second one is I want to withdraw my deposit. If you notice, they have, even though both are call to actions or buttons, they have a different design. Why? Because you want users to notice this first. You as a PM, you don't want your users to withdraw the deposit, because it will mean that they have churned or they have left the platform, and the likelihood of them coming back would be very, very low. So you would not want to lose your users by withdrawing, by letting them withdraw a deposit. So this is what you would want to highlight here, that no, I changed my mind, which means that I don't want to withdraw it anymore. Usually primary buttons have a high contrast with reference to the background they are in, and the secondary buttons have a low contrast. So here if you see, the contrast difference between the secondary button and the background is zero. I mean, because both are white, and here you have red and white, which is a high contrast combination. So again, with reference to axis of interaction, this is placed higher with respect to secondary button. So you would want to place primary actions closer to the axis of interaction, uh, and secondary buttons away, like we discussed earlier. So this is how CTA, and how you should think about designing a call to action or primary and secondary buttons. Any questions?
This is also the reason why withdraw has not been. Withdraw is written just like a text. I cannot even
Yeah,
figure out whether it is actually a button.
exactly.
Right?
I actually wanted someone to notice that. Very, very good.
Actually, I noticed it, but I waited to ask because I thought you would be saying something about it as well.
Right. Yeah, that is exactly why withdraw is not highlighted. And also, it is not very contrasting. Like if you see here, this is like a kind of very deep blue and red, which is a very contrasting color. However, yellow and blue, this particular blue, is not that contrasting, and also you have not highlighted it. It's just like a plain text. So for, like, intentionally we are trying to hide it, but um not to a very large extent.
No. Right.
Quick question on this. Do you track the impact of design changes?
Yes, we do.
Okay, through the data and analytics, that okay, if highlighting that text, did that reduce the number of people
we
withdrawing the money or
we
something like this?
we see heat maps, we see user sessions, that what they actually did when they went through this flow. So there are several tools like UX Cam, then there is I forgot the name. There's Full Story, then Smart Look. So these are the few tools you use to see heat maps and understand where users are clicking more, what are they viewing more. So which page has more impressions, what the flow is like. So that's how you analyze for designs. Also, we do a lot of usability testing to see how users are reacting to a particular interface or design.
I also do
Okay.
A/B testing, right?
Yeah,
For
sure.
the same.
You can do A/B testing, like whenever you have to compare two different things, and you according to your estimations, you think both may have equal amount of impact, so you cannot decide. That is when you do A/B testing, to understand, to let your users give you the answer that which would have more impact, or which would be a better experience.
Okay, but for the ones, for the, let's say, the change that the thing that's been done here, no, I changed my mind, has on the high contrast, while the other one is on a low contrast. This is kind of intuitive and it comes directly to the designer. So this kind of a thing gets not tested. ऐसा है क्या?
Yeah, these things are not tested. These are basic principles, to set different contrast values with reference to the background. Would the action you don't want the user to take, in a smaller font, try to hide it. These are very basic principles, and validated by many other products. So these are some things you don't need to test actually. Basically, operate on this. You operate using these, you know, tools and principles.
Mhm.
Cool.
One more question. Going back to one thing Nishid said yesterday, that in startups or smaller companies, being a product manager, you might have to do product designs sometimes. Have you had this experience? What tools do you use? Any thoughts around it?
So most companies today use Sketch or Figma. Both are only iOS compatible apps.
Mhm.
Both have their own pros and cons. While collaboration is much easier in Figma, it is comparatively a new tool, and a lot of users are a lot of designers are making switch from Sketch to Figma. I use Adobe XD, and that is where I've made this presentation also. So,
Mhm.
I mean, for every kind of design that I do, I use Adobe XD. And also, I learned how to, design in, these tools like XD, Sketch. Because even before I go to the designer, I want to, make a user flow in my mind. So while designer will help you with everything, about how the interface should be, how the UI should be, a part of user experience is something you have to support there. You have to tell how the flow would be. So sometimes you have to do wireframing, low fidelity wireframing and not high fidelity. Low fidelity means that you don't have any um, tech, you don't have any colors, you don't have any illustrations, or you don't have your buttons and text mapped to your design language. It's just you putting components at the place where they are supposed to be, and information architecture, so where what content should be, and that's how you design the flows. So if you, in case you want to do wireframing, in case that is required, then you might use Balsamic, which is a drag and drop tool, or Adobe XD, which gives you very rich quality wireframe. So that is why I use that. In Rapido, I used to do wireframing because PMs used to make the wireframes there. But in Bounce, PMs don't make wireframes, though they obviously define the user experience, but even the wireframing is done by the designers. So
Okay.
completely depends on your company. Nishit comes from a very early stage startup, so there a PM does a little of everything.
Mhm.
So he gets the opportunity to work across the breadth of the product, to explore multiple verticals. Sometimes work as a designer, sometimes work as a QA. So also understand how the entire software architecture is built uh, for the product. So they understand things um, across a much wider horizon. We do it like in companies like Bounce, which are at a scale. We focus on more detailed things across a more dedicated verticals.
Okay, sounds good. This was helpful. One last question for us who are about to make some transitions or thinking of getting into PM and does not have any design experience prior to it. What would you recommend? Because these tools would be pretty new. Which tool to choose? How do we approach it? Do we look at some tutorials to get friendly with the tools and then approach this problem and apply these principles on top of it? Just some thoughts around it would be helpful as well.
Sure. So I'll answer that. I don't know
Mhm.
if So basically, if you start with the basics, if you are very clear with what we are teaching you over here, and you know the laws of UX, how things should be arranged, how things should be grouped, and everything, you can actually do it on pen and paper only. Like in your interviews, also it's just pen and paper plus a whiteboard. You'll be that's all you require to make a quick wireframe, right? And apart from it, I would not suggest you to get into high fidelity tools like Figma and Sketch as of now. This will be only helpful to you if and when needed, right? Suppose, let's say you learn Sketch today, but you may go to a company tomorrow that uses Figma, so that may change. Like It's a very little bit of difference, but it may have a significant impact. So it's good to have one basic understanding of all the UX and UI knowledge that there is, right, about visuals like colors, contrast, and how do you put colors on a screen and everything. And apart from it, you need to know the UX principles, UX laws, whatever we are teaching over here, and plus know one wireframing tool. So it can be any tool, Balsamic or Miro that I sent right now. Balsamic is mostly used. So it's not very complex. It's just drag and drop. You just take a phone screen. A ready-made phone screen is there. You can just take it, and you have a ready-made button over there. You can drag and drop it. You have a toolbar. You can drag and drop it. So it's quite simple. If you watch some tutorials or read some articles, you'll be able to do it in a day or two.
Okay. Okay. What did you mention initially in the interviews? What do we do?
It's mostly whiteboard, right?
Okay,
Yeah, your product design interviews will have you'll need to solve something like maybe improve a product or maybe design something very new, like alarm for blind people, alarm clock for blind people, right? So these are the kind of problems you'll get. So first you need to solve it entirely. How do you solve? You ask questions, and then afterwards you may have to draw a wireframe or a quick sketch on the whiteboard or pen and paper.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so moving ahead. So the next one is feedback loop. What does feedback loop mean? So it is basically you motivate a user to perform a certain action or reach a certain goal. When they do it, they get a feedback after performing that action, which makes them motivated again. Might sound very vague right now, but let me give you an example. Let's take Tinder as an example. So Tinder motivates you to, swipe right or swipe left when you see a profile, because you are on Tinder to find potential matches for a date. So that is your motivation. When you swipe right or swipe left, based on your action, you get a feedback, which in case of Tinder is getting a match, which obviously makes you feel good because you matched with someone. This motivates you again to swipe more so that you get more matches, and this is a feedback loop. So feedback, essentially the purpose of having a feedback loop is to make people feel good, make your users feel good. Another example of feedback loop is Facebook, where you upload posts. So motivation to upload posts is that you want to share your experience with a wider audience, with your friends, with your family, to share what your day was like, or maybe you went for a vacation. So that is your motivation. Action is uploading the post, so you upload a photo or maybe just some content which you want to share. The feedback is people like and comment on your post, which makes you feel good that people are acknowledging it, you are getting importance and attention, which motivates you to post more. So it's a feedback loop. um, this is again, this concept may not be valid for every product, but for all social products it's definitely valid. Anywhere where you're engaging with the community, a feedback loop is always valid. um, so this is a good way to build your product, keeping in mind that you have to establish a feedback loop there so that users feel good about performing in action. Example, if you uploaded a photo and there was no likes and comments option, even though people would see your photo and maybe feel good about it in their minds, they would not be able to communicate it to you. So you would feel useless uploading a photo. I mean, it would just feel so bad if you uploaded a photo and nobody could like it. I mean, what's the point? I can see it, but if I can't tell you how it is, then I don't feel, as a user I won't feel anything about uploading. So hence, keeping in mind that um, building these actions with a feedback loop is very important. Any question?
Yes. Just like we talked about social media, so social media, you are getting your action validated, or you're getting a motivation from other people. So would you also categorize the following as uses of a feedback loop? So when you when you like or love something on Instagram, so it's actually colorless. The heart is actually colorless earlier, but when you actually press the button, it's a red color, and you actually like to see it more. Also, so this will probably be more relatable to people who are using Swiggy. So whenever you rate an order, uh, there's a big star that pops up. If you let's say if you rate an order 5 stars, there's a big star that will pop up and say, "We are so happy we could serve you well." Or
Mm-hmm.
if you let's say press 1 star, then the same star will pop up and say, "Oh, we didn't do well, and we'll try our best."
We are sorry for your experience.
So that kind of a feedback. So just saying that feedback could be from in-app elements as well, and not from users. Would you categorize the same? Uh, would you categorize this in the same design principle?
So here, the in case of ratings that you said, that is a customer delight or UI delight, or making things look good. From that perspective, I think Swiggy has built it. My motivation to give a rating will never be to see those emojis. It
No, actually done it for those.
Okay.
Okay, because you wanted to explore it, but if for the first time when you have already seen it, I wouldn't be motivated. I mean, users wouldn't be motivated to go through that entire process of writing a feedback just to see those emojis. So
Okay.
I mean, might work for some users, who just like watching that animation. That is why we have those animations in place, but this is not something scalable and doesn't fall under this concept.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think a similar example would be like on my phone, if I uninstall an app, there's these fireworks kind of things. So if I get motivated by that, I'll just keep uninstalling apps.
there's a
So
fireworks because you uninstall.
yeah, exactly. So when I uninstall apps, there's like this popping up, and to be honest, the first time it happened, I was like, "Whoa, this is really cool," and I went on uninstalling a few apps just for fun.
So
So
which,
I think
which phone is this?
this is Poco. So it's a
Poco.
Xiaomi. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Don't
yeah.
know
So
why Poco is
So
doing.
yeah, if you uninstall a lot of apps, you'll actually be satisfied with the way your phone works. It will work at a good speed. It will never lag or something.
yeah, but then I would uninstall apps that I require for things. So it'd be like it's a trade-off there.
No, don't. I guess you guys are focusing a lot on the feedback part because it's called feedback loop, but focus on the
The
motivation part.
motivation.
That
Yeah.
drives, that
Got it.
drives the entire feedback loop. So whenever you want to evaluate that if this principle is valid, or where you should use this principle, first of all, don't look at products and then try to see if the principle fits there. uh, Try to, that is a wrong approach. You have to take the reverse path where you know the principle. Now you see how you can use this to build something. Don't try to fit the principle in something which is already built, right? So cool. Next we have, yes, number 10, optimize design for your moderately active users. So imagine you have 10 friends. Out of that, two friends are like people who always call you, keep checking up on you, um, always there for your birthdays. So it's very likely that you would be willing to do more for them because they are doing a lot for you. That is human nature. You would be like, "Ki, for the rest 8 friends of mine, I'll be I'll just be cordial. They are just, they are like, we catch up once in 6 months. We just be nice to each other. And I would care more about the other two friends who, actively keep talking to me, keep checking up on me." So this is something which we all do, right? So, but in case of your customers, that is not how it works. You have to, so if taking, going by the friend example I gave, you'll have to now, since you know that those two people are already in touch with you already, very actively engaged with you, you would now want the other 8 to engage as well. Why not? I mean, you are a product manager. Why lose those 8 other customers? So also they are more in number. These are just 2, they are just 8. So that's like 80 and 20 ratio. So which means that you would do things. Now your next actions would be based on the fact that you want these friends to talk to you more. Likewise, in case of design, you have to build a product in a way that your majority of your user base, or which is the moderately active user base, is able to use it. You, even though there would be like 20% of your users who are your power users, who are your loyalists, you don't have to optimize your product for them, because they would anyway know how your product works. Something, for example, if I'm a user of Amazon and I open the app like every day, I know where things are placed in Amazon. And if I request for a feature, you would think that, okay, let me build it for this customer because she's my power user, why not? But if that feature is causing your other 80% customers to suffer because they would see a sudden change, they come like once in a month to the platform and they'll see a sudden change and not be able to use the interface, then you just created a bad experience for the majority. So never optimize for the minority, even if they bring more revenue and engagement to your platform. You don't have to build for the geniuses, you have to build for the idiots. It's like that. You have to build for people who are not able to use it well, instead of making it better and better for the people who already have gotten the hang of it. This the Yeah.
Just a quick question. How do you precisely describe a moderately active user or the average user?
Yeah, this depends on company to company. You can have your own customer segmentations and have multiple segments based on what kind of, is it a transactional based business. So for something like Bounce, we would define our customer segments as active, moderately active, loyalist, about to lose, passive, based on the number of rides they are doing in a particular period of time. For something like Google Pay, it would be based on the number of transactions you do in a month. So completely depends on what your baseline metric is. If your baseline metric is, say, your median users are doing uh, so your users are doing like a median number of transactions as, say, 10 every month, then you would baseline it, and with respect to that you will define your other segments. So it is again a, depends on the company how you want to define it. um yeah. Okay. Next is recognition versus memory. So I have a list. Let me just get that. Yeah. So can anyone draw or just explain how Pepsi, Lay's, Cadbury, Britannia, and Red Label's logo looks like?
We can start one by one. For Pepsi.
Take it, Pepsi. Just describe the logo with colors and all. What colors are there?
Red
And
and
don't
blue.
Google.
The red and blue ball that we have with Pepsi with like the white line in the middle.
Okay. Some more details.
थोड़ा सा सर्कल है, बाहर भी वाइट है.
Can you draw it? Can you draw it on a paper and show?
एक मिनट, I'll get a paper.
Google मत करना बस. Others, like Nikunj, Karthik, Sahil, why don't you draw?
I honestly can't call much about Pepsi's logo. I mean, I have just rough sketch in my head, which is mostly wrong.
Okay, cool. Why
Something like
don't
this. Can you see?
oh no, can you just take it a little backward? Okay, okay, that's very bad, Sudhanshu. Cool. Why don't you guys try BMW?
Blue, white.
Yeah, it's a circle.
Draw and show it, please. Like draw it on your phone or wherever you want to.
There's an option to draw here also. If you can enable the whiteboard on Zoom, everyone can see.
For you, right?
I mean, everyone can try that as well.
Yeah, you can annotate. It's open. Is someone drawing BMW?
I'm not sure.
It's okay. Who's this drawing on the screen?
That's me.
Something like, okay, right, yeah.
The
That.
blue color here and the blue here, and the rest are white. I don't know how to fill in color. There is an option to fill in color also. This is also white. Very bad at drawing.
Okay.
हाँ कुछ ऐसे तो
Fish
दिखता है.
wedding.
Cool.
There's a black boundary.
Are you sure the
Black
angle
boundary.
is correct?
Angle थोड़ा सा टेढ़ा होता है.
Yeah, it's slightly tilted, I think.
Okay. And the third one is Cadbury.
Cadbury is simply Cadbury written with cursive writing.
Yeah, cursive.
Right, right.
And, yeah, calligraphy.
Very bad at writing, especially cursive here.
Okay, okay. Then why don't you try Britannia?
I don't remember what Britannia looks like.
Okay. Red Label?
Which the T, the other one?
Yeah, yeah. What's the other one? The T.
Okay. No, I don't remember that also.
Okay, cool. Does anyone else remember Red Label? Or Nescafe?
Nescafe was just Nescafe in white font, in this white colored font, I guess, with a
And then
large
brown.
N and just
Yeah, yeah.
the Escafe
Large N.
following afterwards.
Cool. So, if I say that, most of you slightly struggled in, even remembering the logos of the products you often see or often use, would I be wrong or right?
Right.
You're right.
Yeah, right.
Right. But if I showed the logo to you, you would immediately recognize them, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
So that is how human brain works. You may not exactly remember how the logos are, but when you see, you will be able to recognize. So even when designing, you have to make sure that you don't have to, pull a lot of information from the users where user have to think about this. Instead, you show it to them so that they can select, right? So that is how concept of recognition versus memory works. Cool. Next. Number 12, learning is slow, habits are fast. What does this mean? That, if you had to learn something, it would be very challenging. But if you could just practice or do it again and again, repeated number of times, then you would just, eventually learn it. So by not learning it, but by practicing it. So here I have this example of keyboard shortcuts for Microsoft Word. Now imagine if I gave you this list and asked you to memorize it. I mean, wouldn't you go crazy? Like if you have to memorize shortcuts. But if you refer to this list and keep using it frequently, you would automatically just learn. That's how we know so many keyboard shortcuts, right? We never take a list and learn it together. We use it, and that's how we remember them. So this is another principle you have to follow when designing, that don't expect users to learn a process. Put them in a loop where they get habituated doing things. The
So
next
the onboarding tour, the coach marks and the onboarding tool, that works in the same way, right? It gets you to do an action, and then you can repeat it when you want.
Yeah, that is one of the examples. You might imagine if you got a list where everything was mentioned, that press this button to, upload a photo, press this button to post. But instead you get coach marks. So, you're made to do that so that you remember it better.
Ways of apps, popular apps which have shortcuts, right? So as soon as you go, let's say there's a button called save, right? So if you go and click on the save button, just over there on the hover or on the side of the button, you will find the shortcut written for it. So that way you will learn, right? Okay, this is the shortcut. Maybe next time you just press the shortcut. Every time you keep on going to the button, you'll see that this is the shortcut for that. Basically, take any onboarding for any popular app, you'll see this patterns, and you might have noticed this pattern where you are shown a red dot, right, on some section. So let's say Instagram has introduced a feature of close friends, and you don't know like how to navigate to that feature. They just could have told you, okay, we have a feature called close friends in this section, but what they do instead is they keep a red dot on some section in accounts, and then once you click on it, they highlight on some another section with a red dot, and then once you click on it, you are able to see the close friends feature. So yeah, this is how you actually educate the user and you form a habit.
Yeah, that's a good example. The last one is hidden versus upfront. So if so, a lot of times how designers or PMs operate is that they think that um, hide things under a primary layer so that you have a clean UI. You don't have to put things upfront, and you'll have a clean UI. So if you can categorize, or group things together, put them under one category, put them under one button or CTA. So, but why you shouldn't do it? Because you want users to take better decisions. You want them to take faster decisions. In case, for as you can see this example of getting Tinder Gold, which subscription plan you would choose if it was inside a drop down. So you had to click on the drop down and then see the menu and options, which would be a very, very bad experience. Here you are able to see them upfront and take the decision right here itself. So drop down would act as a drop off point because you would have to take an action of clicking and then browsing through the options. Here you are just seeing them upfront. So always go for the option of upfront if it requires a user to take a decision. And also from an experience point of view, if you can fit things within the real estate you have, then it makes more sense to not hide them. Slide. So what did we learn? What are the goals of design? What's the goal of design? Why should you design? To solve a user's problem. That's the first and the primary goal. um, After that, when you know the solution, you know what the product would be like, you have to help them perform tasks with ease. Before you upgrade your product with fancy things, upgrade your users. Build products in a way that your users become smarter. The fourth one is make users efficient. Make them do things faster, with better accuracy, so make them accurate. And the last one is help them take better decisions, reduce their cognitive load. So these are the major goals of design. That is why you should design. Yeah. Okay. The last and the very important thing, which I want you all to do, in the next 4 weeks and come up with insights. How to develop a sense of design. You have to study apps, not just use apps. You have to study apps, which means that when you are using an app, you have to be observant about how the design is done, how the flow, the experience has been designed, how the flow has been designed, and how competitors are doing it differently. So every day pick one app, start using it very extensively, see what the flows are like, how the competitors are doing it, and keep taking notes, because like here writing things down will be very helpful, because eventually what you have analyzed you may forget it. Then do it with some other app and see what works for you, what annoys you as a user, what experience you might want to improve. If doing a task is taking 6 steps in one app and taking 3 steps in the other app, then why the experience has been built. So, and evaluate and compare experiences in multiple apps. Some apps would have payment gateway like Razorpay integrated, some would just have UPI SDKs integrated, some would have payment flows like Just Pay. So just do a competitive analysis at what is the difference, what works better, and why. That's how you'll develop a sense of design. You'll also be able to keep yourself updated with the newest trends, like what is the new kind of design each company is trying. So keep updating the apps, keep trying them. Next week it's just Friday and Saturday. Don't want to overload you guys or even ourselves. And do fill the feedback. We are like concluding the first week, so makes sense to give a feedback now. Do fill the form. Yeah. Cool, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Aditi.
guys. It was really fun.
Yeah.